Ho, ho, ho! Welcome to the Slapendipity Winter Special. We praise the winter solstice and we praise the winter holidays. And on this day, Devon and I come to you with a twist of a tale, a tailing twist, where we tell tales to you.
Pigs have twisty tails. I'm
Devon,
Devon.
are pigs winter?
They are still alive in the winter. You've never seen a pig
This
covered
is
in
true.
snow?
No, have you?
Yes, I have. I have a story about it, actually, but you can continue.
For this little gift treat, if you will, Devon and I will be coming up with stories, and y'all can choose whose story you enjoyed better, and then we'll be combining ourselves into one story later on. So for this first section, if you will, we will begin. Did you want to start, Devon? Is that what you were trying to imply?
No, you can start. But yeah, these are like the stocking stuffer stories compared to the real Christmas story that's like the main gift that we'll be telling later.
Yes.
The stocking stuffer story, and yours is first.
Yes, my stocking stuffer story. Keep in mind, this is all improv.
No, this is a true story. This really happened.
You know, it's definitely will be fine. Okay. Yep. Once upon a time, long ago, on a winter's night with snow falling delicately from the sky, the smell of smoke whooshed from chimneys far and wide, and in a lone house we see a small child whittling their thumbs at the Christmas tree, waiting for Santa's arrival, trying to stay up. Mom and Dad, already out of luck, asleep in their bed. The child goes into the basement, looking for entertainment, and stumbling upon an old Christmas book that he thought long gone. He opened the book, and in it he fell, and inside he said, "Oh my, oh swell, where have I been? What do I do? Where am I now?" As he looked and gathered himself, he saw the promise of candy cane men 7 feet tall. They looked down on the boy and said, "Child, this is not where you belong. Tell me, where have you been in song?" And as they say this, fellow candy cane men swirl and dance on their candy cane feet and drum their bells. The boy sings, "Candy cane men, oh great, please hear my fate. I await for the great Saint Nick, and I fell so far and so deep, and now I see you standing by my feet." The candy cane men laughed and hollered and said, "Silly boy, this is where you falter." They broke off a piece of snow from the frozen lake and said, "Take this if you want to be great." He grabbed the snow, which turned to be a staff of ice in his hand, and looked to the candy cane men. "Where do I go? What do I do? How do I get home?" The candy cane man pointed to a giant hill in the sky, where the full moon shone bright, and low, and he spoke, "Little boy, go to that hill and you'll be awoke." And the little boy, staff in hand, says goodbye to his new friends. He walks and he hikes and he scurries, ever twist and twirl in each path he takes, avoiding the rocks and gazing at the lake. After what felt like hours, he started to become sour, and at his feet he saw a mouse and cat, friends, standing tall. He got low and said to them, "Mr. Cat, Mr. Mouse, what are you doing?" And they replied, "Why, it is Christmas. We are friends, we are sharing, and we are caring for each other." And he said, "Wow, that's so cool. I wish I had friends here." And they hopped on his shoulder, and they together in unison said, "We will be your friends." And the three strode off even more to the moon, renewed vigor in his heart. The path grew dark, the moon getting low, his time for escape growing painfully low. The cat, perched over his shoulder, says, "Little boy, we have not much time. You must cross the lake if you want to be home without a fine." The mouse said, "Brave cat, you expect too much. We're too big at 3 people such, and the lake will not support us all, and we may fall." The brave cat looked to the moon and looked to the boy. "If we want him home, we must do this shortcut." The boy, pondering and weighing his options, looked at the brave cat and the small mouse and said, "I believe in you two, and I believe in me." And so he made big strides across the lake without a fear on his face. But all of a sudden, a terrible sound. The ice on the lake breaking apart into many parts, everyone being tossed and turned, and he flung and flew, but held firm to his staff and used it as a paddle. When he heard the cry of the brave cat splashing in the water, "Little boy, I've fallen! Please, help me!" And the small mouse looked on. "Brave little boy, what do we do? If we leave him be, he won't be coming back anew." The boy turned his block of ice that he sat with his ice rod and paddle and extended it out to the cat to reach. But the cat's claws found no grip on the slippery ice. And so the boy reached further and further until he himself fell in. Now he sank into the bottom of this lake as he tried to grasp for the cat, the mouse, and the moon. All seeming lost, all growing dark. He heard nothing, not even a lark. But from his gaze upon the moon, he saw what could only be the most magical creature of all, a flying reindeer, scooping him up by the scruff of his collar and tossing him into a sleigh of Big Yonder. The boy looked bewildered. "What's going on? What's happening? What am I at the moon?" to see before him a great big man in a red big coat with black leather boots and a great big smile. Silly little boy, you fell asleep. You're not gonna make it in time at this rate. The boy saw the moon hanging lower and lower as the sun began to peek from behind him. And he, with all his might, said, It's been such a fight, I don't know if I can go on. When he heard the little squeak from his pocket of the little mouse and the chirpings of a brave cat going, "It's not too late." The great big sleigh spin and spun and launched the little boy at the moon. And from there he hits the moon. Surely this would be a terrible fall, but he instead raised from it, through it, and over it. And the little boy saw he was at the Christmas tree, his thumbs clutching themselves. All seemed to be right. All seemed to be fine. And from that side, he swore he heard the skittering of a mouse. The end. Finn.
Yes. E minor. What would you say the moral of that story is?
Don't fall asleep next to a Christmas tree.
Okay. Now, what?
Also, the moon is a portal.
What are the like the mice and the ice symbolic for? In the paddle.
Well, the staff of ice is confidence that was given to him by others, but upon his journey, he realized his confidence should come from himself, and that when the cat couldn't grip onto the staff of ice, it was because he was not confident in himself to do what he needed. And the cat's a she. I'm so sorry. I've been misgendering them this entire time. And that's what that happened. The mouse is just a chill bro.
Well, yeah, like it's an ice mouse.
It wasn't. I mean, sure, why not?
He's chilly, icy.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. What's the title of your story?
The hillside moon on a bed of ice.
And it's not June. It's Christmas.
Yeah.
I liked the freeform rhymes that would come and go.
Yeah, I didn't want to, be too predictable about it.
'Twas the ice before Christmas, because it was all icy.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Alright, now that I've given you such a high bar to clear, I invite you.
To tell my story? Okay, my story is called Harold the Christmas Snow Pig. So, once upon a time, there was a pig and he was covered in snow. His name was Harold, and it was around Christmas time. Now, if there's one thing that Harold hated besides being out cold in the snow in his pasture, it was being whacked across the face with an iron bar. Now, his farmer, the guy who owned him, his name was Ricky Erickson. Now, Mr. Erickson really liked to have discipline over on his farm. He carried this iron lead pipe around with him, and he used it kind of as a walking stick. But he'd always whack the animals across the face if they didn't do well. Back in the day, he had used this iron prod as his brand. So at the end of it is, this little metal thing that has a big E on it for Erickson, and he'd use that and he'd brand all of his animals. But obviously he would only do that when the animal was first born. But now he doesn't do that anymore. Now he just whacks them with it when they're misbehaving. So Harold, the Christmas snow pig, was out in the field, and he was being covered in snow, but he hated the cold. He saw the old farmer Ricky Erickson coming out of the barn, and he realized that if the farmer came over to him, he might get whacked across the face with the iron pole, and he really didn't want that to happen, so he moseys on over to the apple orchard. Now, strictly speaking, Harold was not supposed to be in the apple orchard. Now, if you know anything about Christmas pigs, you know that they love apples. Pigs love munching on them apples with their piggy teeth. But he wasn't supposed to be there. Obviously, the farmer didn't want him eating all the apples, but he also knew that if he ate the ones that had already fallen on the ground, then it would be okay. Those weren't going to get eaten by no one anyway. So Harold the Christmas pig goes over and he shakes the snow off of him and he goes sniffing on the ground looking for some apples. A lot of pigs really like eating mushrooms and truffles, but he was more of an apple pig. That's why they called him Harold the Apple Pig. Or they called him that when it wasn't Christmas time. Now he goes wandering through the orchard, can't find any apples on the ground, and he comes to a large fence. This fence is the border of the farmer's property. It's where his farm ends. But Harold knew one spot where the fence was broken and he could slip on through. So he decides that his best course of action would be go down to the farmer's market in the middle of town. So he sneaks on past the broken fence and he just starts waddling down the road, waddle, 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 through the snow with his little piggy feet leaving footprints behind him. He knows there's a risk that Mr. Erickson might follow him into town, but he figures this is the one way he's going to get his Christmas apple, and he really wants to eat an apple for Christmas. Maybe even like a caramel apple. He even gets very excited at the thought of having a bobbing for apples bin, a barrel full of apples, because he's a pig and he'll just eat all the apples. So anyway, he's walking into town and he passes some houses in the suburban streets, and he sees in the front of one yard is a snowman. The snowman has some coal buttons and a big black top hat, and he has a carrot for a nose. And Harold the Christmas pig walks over to the snowman and he says hello, and the snowman says hello, and he tips his hat, and he asks where Harold the Christmas pig is going. And Harold the Christmas pig says, I'm going to market to try to buy an apple. And the snowman says, apples? I love apples. I have a stupid carrot for a nose, because that's what the kids who built me gave me, but I actually prefer apples to carrots. I know that a lot of people will see a big red nose and think that you're kind of clownish. They'll say that you should have a carrot nose, but I would actually prefer having an apple nose. You know, it's kind of unsettling when people come down the street and say, oh my god, Mr. Snowman, you have the cutest little nose. And so I would actually rather have a big red apple nose. And so Harold the Christmas pig says, okay, you can come along on my adventure with me. And so Harold the Christmas pig and the cute little nose snowman start walking down the street, heading toward the farmer's market. It's about this point that the snow is starting to settle down on the ground, the road is freezing over with ice, and Harold the Christmas pig is remembering why he hates the cold so much. And it's because he doesn't wear any shoes. It's because he doesn't wear any clothes at all, actually. Now he looks over at the cute little nose snowman, and he notices the scarf that's wrapped around his neck, and he notices the hat on his head. And he says, cute nose snowman, you are a snowman, and you like being cold, and you like being snowed on, but I am merely a Christmas pig. Can I actually borrow your scarf and your hat? And the snowman says, sure, I have no need of them. And so he gives the pig his scarf and his hat, and it makes Harold the Christmas pig a little warmer as they continue down on their journey. As they're walking, the snow is accumulating, and it's actually making it a little difficult to see. But it is actually making the cute snowed man even more stronger and powerfuler, because he's got some snow all over him. So they're walking, and they go over a bridge and across a stream, and they're heading toward town. And they come across a friendly little caterpillar. And the friendly little caterpillar, his name's Freddy. Freddy the friendly caterpillar is walking down the road. And he says, Piggy and Snowman, where are you going? And they say, we're going to the farmer's market to get some apples. And the caterpillar says, oh my gosh, I love apples. My first home was an apple. I've graduated now. I live in a big cabbage with my wife and my kids, but, you know, it was nice living in an apple when I was in college. And so Harold the Christmas pig and the cute nose snowman say, okay, Mr. Freddy the caterpillar, you can come along with us. And so Freddy the caterpillar says, okay. And so Freddy the friendly caterpillar and Harold the Christmas pig and the cute nose snowman start walking down the street back toward the farmer's market. It's at this point that the snow is really picking up and the roads are getting very, very slippery. And Harold the Christmas Pig looks over at Freddy the Friendly Caterpillar and sees that on all 100 of his legs, because he's one of those caterpillars with 100 legs, I think we call those centipedes, but they're the same thing. And he looks over at Freddy the Friendly Caterpillar and he says, "Sir, you have so many legs and you have so many boots on your legs. I only have 4 legs. Could I potentially borrow 4 of your boots?" And Freddy the Friendly Caterpillar says, "Yes, of course you may, sir. For I have so many, I can give you some to spare." And so he gives 4 of his boots to Harold the Christmas Pig, and he now has boots, and he now has a scarf, and he now has a hat. He's all nice and bundled warm for the storm that's coming, and the 3 friends continue on to the Christmas market. They finally reach it, and there's beautiful songs wafting through the air along with the smell of hot chocolate and maybe even some caramel apples. And they walk amongst the crowd, and the snowman's looking around, and the pig's looking around, and the caterpillar's looking around, and they see a stand. And it's actually from the farmer down the road from theirs. Ricky Erickson has this long-standing rivalry with Mrs. Hogsworth, who sells good Granny Smith apples. Now, Harold likes apples of all kinds, and he never gets Granny Smith apples, because those aren't the kind that they grow on his farm. And they walk over to the table, and Harold the Christmas Pig says, "I would like an apple." And the lady says, "Okay, that'll be a couple dollars." Now, Harold the Christmas Pig is now realizing that he doesn't have any money, and so he turns to his 2 friends and asks them if they have money. Freddy the Friendly Caterpillar says unfortunately he doesn't, and so they look at the cute-nosed snowman, who, of course, has some coins for eyes. He has 2 gold dollars. One is his left eye, one is his right. And he says, "You know what? For you, Harold, my oldest friend, I can lend you some money." And so he plucks out his eyes and he gives them to Harold, and Harold gives them to the lady, and he buys 2 apples. Harold then takes one of the apples and he puts it underneath his hat for safekeeping, and he takes the other apple and he looks at his 2 friends, and he realizes now that he's going to have to pick one of them to share the apple with. And he has a moment of quiet contemplation when maybe he thinks that he'll give the apple he has under his hat, the one that he wanted most of all, to his friends. They, after all, saved him from the warmth. He could give one to the cute-nosed snowman, whose eyes he took, whose hat he took, whose scarf he took, and he could give one to Freddy the Friendly Caterpillar, whose boots he took. And he would have no apples, but at least he would have friends and he would be warm. And he stops and he thinks for a second, and then he eats both of the apples. And his friends look on. Well, the snowman didn't look on, he doesn't have any eyeballs, but the friends stare at him, and they're like, "Did you really just eat both apples?" And Harold says, "Well, you know, I do really love apples. Goodbye." And then he leaves the caterpillar without his shoes, and he leaves the snowman without any eyes. And they're stuck there, basically forever, with no way of getting home. And Harold the Christmas Pig starts walking back to his farm, when the people in the farmer's market notice that there's a pig walking by. They notice this fat, plumpy Christmas pig. And they say, "Oh, look, I think he escaped from the butcher tent." And they run over and they grab him, and Harold starts squealing for help. But unfortunately, his 2 friends don't give him any mind. They decide that they're going to go off and have their own Christmas adventure. So Harold is grabbed by the townspeople and dragged over to the butcher tent. And he's trying to scream, "No, no, I belong to the pig farmer, Mr. Ricky Erickson." And they say, "I don't think so, pig. I think you're a mean boy, and I think we're going to eat you for Christmas dinner." And so that's exactly what happens. They take Harold the Christmas Pig, who loves apples and hated the cold, and they put a big, plump red apple in his mouth, and they roast him over a fire. And he got what he wanted. He got his apple, and he got his warmth. But even in death, Harold still hated the same thing. He still hated that old Iron E. The end.
Bravo. Bravo. Magnifico.
It's a good story about not taking advantage of your friends, and apples.
And being killed by irony.
Yeah. Because Mr. Erickson would brand him with an E at the end of his iron rod.
Yeah.
There's some subtext there,
Yeah,
if you really pay close attention, you know.
What does the... I can't even ask questions like you did, because it's all so good.
To impress upon the people listening, to restate this, we had no plans for these stories before we started. These were both come
purely
up with
off the
fly.
cuff. And you well exceeded the bar I set. Kudos to you. In this friendly competition of storytelling, I think you may have me beat.
Who's your favorite character?
The snowman goes hard. He gave up his eyes. That was metal. There were a few times where I had to stop myself from gasping and truly a roller coaster of a story.
Yeah. I think that's one that people will be telling around the pig fire for years.
Just
the pig roast.
Mwah. Would listen again.
Okay, so that's our 2 Christmas stories that we individually came up with.
You can see the threads a little bit of how we tell our stories. And now for this third story, we will combine ourselves into one new story.
We're gonna combine our talents and storytelling abilities. This one's gonna be a little different. So what we're gonna do is one of us is gonna start telling a story, and we have a timer. And every 60 seconds, we have to stop talking, and the other person has to pick up and continue the story.
We're already improvising. We're already on the fly. I say 30 seconds.
30 seconds? Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Take turns telling the same story. We have to be, as best we can, connect the dots, right?
Yes, in sync. I don't want... When I was in elementary school, we'd basically have this where we're in computer class, and it's okay, you write a story for 2 minutes and you write a story, and then you swap computers, and so you kind of go around in a big circle as a game of telephone.
And
there's this one guy, his name was Ricky Erickson.
Yeah.
And no, that's a joke, but he would always be and then Godzilla attacked.
Yeah. Or
so every time I picked up a story, it would be oh, 3 paragraphs ago, Godzilla attacked, and I go to the next computer and be 3 paragraphs ago, Godzilla attacked this story too.
Yeah.
And that was fun. And then we used to have this forum when we were in 6th grade, and it was the same thing. Everyone took turns passing a story back and forth. Everyone got a different sentence. And someone thought it was funny for whenever it was his turn, his sentence was, and then they all fell in a hole just big enough that they couldn't get out.
Yeah. It's a little mean-spirited. It's not the kind of fun we're trying to have here.
No, this is collaborative storytelling.
Yes. Devon,
this is Dungeons and Dragons.
Devon, you were so good. I think you should start us off.
Oh, lordy. All right.
Unless you want to, flip a coin for it.
I think I can start.
All
the
right.
piggy took all the coins to buy his apples.
So true.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready. You ready?
All right, I'm going to start the timer, and I'm going to start talking, okay?
Okay.
All right. 'Twas a couple days before Christmas, not quite Christmas Eve, and you have Sammy. Now, Sammy wanted one thing for Christmas, and it was a big, glowing, purple crystal. And he liked big, glowing purple crystals because they reminded him of his mother and the jewel that she used to wear around her neck. Now, his mother had died a couple years previously, and he had never been able to find that purple crystal jewel. So he wanted something that reminded him of that jewel, but wasn't exactly that jewel. That's 30 seconds. Eric, it's your go.
So, he had put it on his list for years and years, but never received something that quite fit the spirit of what he wanted. And this year he decided he would take matters into his own hands. If Santa wasn't gonna bring it to him, he would go to Santa and politely ask of him in person. So he decides to prepare a journey with his backpack, gathering everything he'd need.
He packed his backpack and realized that, unfortunately, he didn't have his Real D ID, nor did he have his passport, which is things that you need for domestic flights within the United States for him to get north, and then for him to fly to the North Pole, and he realized he needed to get money. What he discovered is that he could kind of kill two birds with one stone. If he started working at the local post office, he could save up money, and he could, more importantly, learn Santa's address, and maybe also address a bill to himself so he would have official mail from the United States government to buy a passport with.
So little Sammy set out that day. He marched his little butt down to the post office and said, "I'd like a job, please." And the clerk at the front desk looked at him and said, "Aren't you a little small?" And he said, "I may be small in size, but I'm big in spirit." Impressed by this response, the lady at the desk said, "Well, that's not usually how jobs work, but I have one in mind for you."
Now, that lady behind the desk, her name was Mrs. Clark. And now you may not know this, people listening at home, all you little childrens, but in every post office in the country, Santa always puts one of his elves there so that they can get all the letters that are addressed to Santa and make sure that he gets them. And Mrs. Clark was secretly an elf. And when she looked at Sammy, who had come in to get a job that day, she noticed that he was high in spirit, because he actually held a secret. He had two spirits.
So Mrs. Clark decided that little Sammy was more than just little Sammy. He was little Sammy and little Timmy. And the two of them together, if they discovered what was happening, could truly form the most Christmas experience of all time.
Now, little Timmy had been Sammy's twin in the womb, and his mother was extremely upset when she was expecting to have twins, but one of them didn't make it. This was actually what ended up causing her to tragically lose her life in a skiing accident that wasn't really an accident, because she was upset about losing little Timmy. So when Sammy walked into the post office that day and saw Mrs. Clark, she realized that this boy, with his double Christmas spirit, might convince Santa to bring Christmas to the masses.
Mrs. Clark knew that Santa hadn't been doing so well over the past few years, but that this little boy, who was two boys in spirit, he would be the key. So she got him to work. She had him organize letters, and she had him mop the floor, which was secretly training all along, but he would never know. And she said to little Timmy / Sammy one day,
She said to little Timmy / Sammy, she said, "I'm going to give you your Christmas bonus. Here's $600. This should get you a flight up to the North Pole." And little Timmy said, "I'm a dead child." And then little Sammy said, "How'd you know I want to go to the North Pole?" And Mrs. Clark gave him a big wink and said, "I think I'll see you up there, pal. And besides, I've actually been training you. All this mopping you've been doing, that'll get you a job at the reindeer pen up in the North Pole for Santa."
So little Sammy, with renewed vigor in his heart, decided to go to the airport, which he just walked all the way there, because with enough Christmas spirit, you can do anything. So he marched on over, dodging any trouble that came his way, and he finally made it into the airport lobby, looking at the building before him stretched out like a maze.
And he says, "I know how mazes work. I used to do all the mazes on the back of my cereal boxes." He always loved cereal. Even at Halloween, he'd get all the different branded ones like Count Chocula. He was always upset that they didn't have any Christmas candy cereal. And so he walked through the lobby of the airport, and he walked up to the TSA agent, and he said, "Mr. TSA agent, why don't they have any Christmas cereal?" And the TSA agent said, "If you believe in Santa, you must be a Christian, so you're not Muslim, so we're not going to racially profile you, and we'll just let you through."
The little Sammy then said, "That's a lot to unpack, Mr. TSA agent. Are you doing okay?" And the TSA agent said, "No, little Sammy, I'm not." And little Sammy said, "Mister, how do you know my name? I didn't introduce myself to you." And he goes, don't worry about it, and gives little Sammy a wink and scoots him along the way.
It was the same wink that Mrs. Clark had given him. Sammy thinks to himself, maybe this racist TSA agent is also one of Santa's elves. And so little Sammy gets on the flight that's headed toward the North Pole, but he's the only one on there. He's sitting and he waits as the plane takes off into the sky, and as the announcer comes over the radio and says, "Hey, I hope you all enjoy your flight, this is your pilot speaking," he thinks he might also hear him whisper, "On Dasher, on Dancer, on
Prancer, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner, and Blitzen." Vixen was in there. And little Sammy thought, that's weird. And then he went back to thinking about Christmas cereal and was like, what if there was a cereal about the reindeer and the maze was trying to get them from Santa's pen to Santa's sleigh all ready in time for Christmas?
So the stewardess comes up to him and says, "Hey, little Sammy, would you like your in-flight meal?" and gives him a wink that's just like Mrs. Clark and just like the TSA racist agent. And he says, "Yes, what do you have to offer?" And the stewardess says, "Well, we have Santa-branded cereal." And little Sammy says, "Oh my god, I'll take that." And she comes back with cereal. It looks kind of like Cocoa Puffs. And she says, "This is Santa's specialty cereal. It's called reindeer droppings." And little Sammy looks in his bowl and says...
little Sammy says, "Actually, I might be good. I'll look at the back of the box, though." The stewardess walks away and shrugs and figures he'll eat it at some point. And little Sammy is focused on this maze on the back of the cereal box, and he spends hours trying to solve it, finding each and every possible route, making sure that he knows the one true way to get in and out.
After flying over Canada and also the ocean and heading towards the cold, cold, cold North Pole, he decides he's going to stop looking at the cereal box and glance out the window. And it's almost like he can see a light on in the darkness of the snow falling down, and he realizes they're almost there. He then takes an aspirin and puts on some earplugs because he doesn't want his ears to pop during the descent, and he waits for the plane to finally land at his destination, the North Pole.
The wait was shorter than expected. Must be good weather. The tires hit down, screech! And T goes, "Well, that wasn't too bad. That wasn't too bad at all. Maybe flying's not so bad." And the stewardess comes over and is like, "Yeah, maybe it's not. It's not so bad. You know where you're going, right, little Sammy?" And he goes, "Yes, ma'am, I do. I'm going to Santa's workshop, and I'm gonna confront him myself."
It's at this moment that the pilot comes out of the cockpit to greet Sammy and says, "Oh, ho, ho, I don't know about that, little Sammy. I think that it might take a lot of guts and effort and time to have a meeting with Santa. Although he might be a little closer than you might think. But as a new arrival, you have to get a job if you want to keep your green card. I recommend you go and try to find a job inside of the reindeer sty." And little Sammy says, "Okay," and then the stewardess and the pilot wink at him.
Little Sammy takes his first few steps into this brave new world cold and alone, and he remembers how warm his home was, and was it really worth it? Was everything he was doing? Was it for naught? Is Santa even real? He's been getting mysterious winks all day, but what does that mean? And where was this reindeer stop? But he had to keep going. What would he do if he didn't keep going?
On his way there, he passed a snowman that tipped his hat to him and gave him a wink. That's so weird. He's the 7th person who's done that to me. Sammy realized that all the people who'd been winking at him were actually Santa and his elves and other people who worked at the North Pole. Maybe this was just how people nodded when you're up here. It's just a friendly wave, a wink. So he goes to the sty where they hold the reindeer and he winks at the man outside, and the man outside winks back and says, "You must be here for a job."
And little Sammy says, "That's right, mister. I may be small in size, but I'm big in spirit, and I can clean up any reindeer droppings. I had practice on the plane." And The man goes, "That's a little weird. I hope that's a joke." And he says, "Okay, I'm old and my back hurts, so you're just in luck. You can clean up the reindeer droppings. It's a bit of a maze, but I bet you can find your way out of it." And he gives him a wink again.
Sammy walks in and he sees all 8 of Santa's reindeer milling about, and they all give him winks too. He goes and tries to find a broom, but it's actually back in a storage closet. He has to navigate a maze of stalls and paddocks and different paths to get back there. He walks into a room by accident and sees a bunch of snowmen in there, 4 snowmen in fact, playing poker, and they wink at him too. He winks back, and then he realizes this maze he's in is the same as the back of the cereal box.
With this newfound knowledge, he has a regained sense of confidence. He spent hours on that cereal box, so he can spend twice the time in this maze of real life. And he goes from place to place, and he knows the ins and outs, and he sees the leprechauns in that one door that was a little weird on the cereal box that was Christmas themed, but now it all makes sense because Santa's hosting them for the holidays. And so he keeps going.
And as he's going, he thinks to himself, oh, I guess that's who Lucky from Lucky Charms is. He lives here at the North Pole when it's wintertime. And he goes and he finally finds the broom. And then he says, okay, I guess I have to do the maze backwards now. But he's an expert, so he does the maze backwards, and he goes to the sty where all the reindeer are. And he sees all the 8 reindeer, and they all wink at him again. And he says, okay, I guess it's time to clean up your poop. And so he spends the next couple days sweeping up all the reindeer droppings. And he gets his own little dormitory with the other elves. But the bed is really small and uncomfortable. But every day he wakes up and he does his job sweeping the reindeer poop.
One day, his boss, Mr. Harp, comes up to little Sammy and says, "You've been working so well, and you've been working here for a few days. Here's your green card that you needed, so you don't get deported. Now, I've really liked having you around, Sammy, but it's almost Christmas. Isn't there something that you wanted to do, or... I'm just concerned about your well-being and what your plan is here." And that's when little Sammy says,
I was actually going to ask you if I could have Christmas Eve off. Since the reindeer are going to be flying around the world with Mr. Santa Claus, I figured I won't have to sweep their poop, and I'd like to use that time to maybe take a new walk around this town I live in. And Mr. Hark says, well, I guess that'll be okay. You know what, let's seal this deal the way that you seal deals here at the North Pole, with a wink. And he winks at him with his left eye, and then with his right. He gives him 2 of them. Normally we'd call that a blink, but it was actually separate because they were done at different times.
With little Sammy winks twice at Mr. Hark and waits for his Christmas Eve with renewed vigor that in 3 days' time he'll be able to explore this town and find that purple jewel most of all, to remind him of his mother, whom he loved so much, and he felt a weird sense of distant feelings about he couldn't explain.
He couldn't explain these feelings, but he thought that it might be Timmy urging him onwards. Those 2 days passed quickly, and now it was Christmas Eve. Sammy walked over to Santa's workshop, and he saw a sign on Santa's door saying, I'm taking a long nap before Christmas. And he knocked on the door, hoping that he could wake up Santa. But a bunch of elves came over and said, actually, sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave, and if you don't leave, then we won't be as nice next time. And all 6 of the elves gave him a wink, but he knew this wasn't a friendly wink.
Sammy, standing dejected, turned around and thought, I guess if I can't even see Santa, maybe it's not meant for me to have this purple jewel. What does that mean? What does that say? And he walks outside and trips up in the snow and stumbles upon a candy cane? That's weird. He feels the ground around him, grasping what's in his hand.
The thing in his hand is a sticky candy cane, but it's the full size of a regular cane. He lifts himself up with it and looks and sees it's being held by an adult woman. This is Mrs. Claus. She gives him a friendly wink and says, oh, Sammy, you're so far from home. You've been working so hard in the reindeer sty this year. I think that you might be on the nice list. I know that Mr. Claus is taking a nap. but I think I'm going to take you to him and grant you your Christmas wish.
So she guides little Sammy and says, "You know, I'm kind of just as strong and powerful as him, so let's go check ourselves if you're on the nice list." And they walk over to the lobby, and sure enough, this big paper, floating miles long, divided into nice and naughty, Mrs. Claus rolls up the list with huge arms that make the wind flap inside.
Now, the elf who's in charge of the list ended up being Mrs. Clark, and she looks and she smiles and she winks at Sammy and says, "I've been watching your progress since the beginning, since you were at home, and I'm the one who decided officially that you're on the nice list." And Sammy goes, "That's amazing. Does that mean that I'm gonna get my present?" And she smiles and she says, "Well, you know, I'm not the only one who's been watching you. I can tell you that Santa has been watching you all along. He was actually the pilot who brought you here."
Sammy gasps. "No way! That was Santa? I could have asked him then. I could have stopped all of this from happening. I was right there. He could have just told me, but he didn't. So, is Santa mean? Why did he make me do all of this? I just want a nice memento. What? Can I see him, Mrs. Claus? Can I talk to him? Can I get this straightened out?"
They bring Sammy to Santa's room, and they open the door and see him there in his full red garb. He goes, "Ho, ho, ho! Sammy, you've been such a nice boy this year. You've worked so hard. I just have to ask you one thing. Will you come and sit on my lap and tell me what you want for Christmas, and then ask me what you have to do to earn it?" And Sammy says yes, and he walks over and he takes a seat on Santa's lap and gently caresses his beard and looks into his bright eyes.
As they stare at each other, Sammy stutters out, well, Mr. Claus, I just want the purple jewel like my mother used to have so I can remember her by, since she died in that tragic skiing accident after little Sammy and Timmy and I don't know what I have to do for it. I don't know. Ask you?
Santa gave him a wink, and then said, "Here you go, pal," and reaches down and picks up a purple crystal. He hands it to Sammy, and Sammy says, "This is all I've ever wanted." And he looks up, and Santa gives him one last wink, and then Sammy wakes up in his bed at home, and his dad's leaving over him and says, "Sammy, wake up, it's Christmas time." And Sammy says, "Oh my god, I was having the most wonderful dream. I was at Santa's workshop, and I got this magical crystal purple thing." And his dad says, "Oh, that was just a dream. Are you well rested?" And Sammy goes, "Well, I did get my 40 winks." The end.
And then the dad says, "By the way, here's a gift." And he opens it up, little Sammy, and it's a purple jewel crystal. And little Timmy comes out of little Sammy's body and ascends to heaven.
That was the epilogue.
Yeah. You and your 40 winks! Oh my gosh!
I was keeping tallies.
It's always something to do. Like a devious mastermind.
Did you pick up on it?
No, I was just like, there's something about these winks, but I'm just not getting it.
Once they appeared for once we got to 7, I was like, I wonder if we can get up to 40 winks and then I can have him wake up and it'd just be a pun, because getting 40 winks means taking a nice sleep.
You, mister, you were like, I hate it when people do the Godzilla thing, and it's your turn, and it's 30 seconds, and you go, and then everything happened, and then it ends, actually. Smug son of a gun.
I think it went on for longer than we were expecting. I liked Sammy's arc.
He did.
He went through a lot of hardships, but he ended up getting, he earned it. He deserved. He got it.
Yeah. Well, except then he didn't, unless you read the epilogue.
Well, yeah, it's interpolalistic, It's like, did it happen, or was
Sure.
it a dream,
Sure. Yeah, that was surprisingly fun. Not that I thought it was going to be bad or anything, but the journey we went on together was incredible.
Once I settled on the 40 Winks ending, I'm like, I'll be happy if I get there and it works out, and then Eric either like groans in disappointment and anger or laughs. And I think I got the groan of disappointment and anger. So that's
right.
good.
But there were laughs along the way. There was a little points where I was like, oh no, I feel like we're losing the thread a little bit. It's been a minute since we brought up the mom and the jewel.
No, it was fun. That's his backstory. His mother's tragic skiing, unaliving.
That was actually there are some dark implications with the mother.
Yeah, but there's a happy ending, so that makes it all okay.
There's a happy ending, yeah.
Like Christmas movies,
Well, folks, it went on a little bit longer than we expected, but that's part of the joy of giving gifts, is you don't know quite what you're gonna get or give to someone, but as long as it makes them happy, it's the thought that counts. And with that, I encourage you to do this with your own friends and family if you can, and if you can't, I hope we at least provided for you in some small way.
And remember, always be nice to postal workers around Christmas. Don't be racist at the airport, and it always helps to work hard for what you want.
Good. Enjoy.
Merry Christmas.
Holidays. Bye.